Hello and welcome back. We will continue reading The Complete Idiot's Guide to Alchemy by Dennis William Hauck. This is Part 2, The Principles of Alchemy. Alchemy is based on the precepts of the Emerald Tablet, an ancient artifact attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. The Hermetic teachings describe a dynamic living universe that arose from a primordial soup known as the first matter. Hermetic concepts permeated ancient philosophy, religion, science, and other traditions and have been passed down to us in an underground river of secret teachings. These teachings were kept hidden because of their great power to tap into universal patterns and transform things in accordance with deeper laws of nature. The actual methods and operations used by alchemists were concealed in unique ciphers, glyphs, and symbols that they used to communicate with one another. Chapter 5: The Secret Language of Alchemists. In this chapter, the perfect language of birds, bird symbolism in alchemy, lions, dragons, and other animals in alchemy, the mystery of the rose, the unspoken wisdom of ciphers. Alchemists communicated with each other in a special language of metaphors, symbols, and unique ciphers. Many of them even invented their own alphabets and secret scripts to keep their work private. Whether or not they needed to keep their writing secret is debatable, for to most outsiders, the writing of alchemists were all gibberish. The tradition of secrecy in alchemy goes back to its origins in Egypt, where priests believed the universal principles contained in the writings of Thoth were so powerful that they must not be shared with those who might abuse them. So they discussed the secrets in riddles, symbols, and images that only the initiated would understand. To pass the secret teachings down through the ages, the ancients encoded them in sacred writings and symbolic images carved into public monuments and buildings. This tradition of concealing secrets openly in the architecture of buildings was carried on during the heyday of alchemy in the Middle Ages, in the sacred architecture of cathedrals and the symbolic sculptures and monuments in the center of cities. The language of the birds. Alchemists used an oblique writing style to communicate with one another publicly, while concealing the true subject matter. This method of symbolic writing appears unintelligible unless you have the necessary key to the symbolism to be able to interpret it. Their style of communication became known as the language of the birds, and was considered a higher or more perfect language that was the key to true knowledge. It was also known as the green language or living language, to indicate it carried more than just static words. This idea arose from the haunting suspicion that the high-pitched chirping of birds was actually a superior language beyond our comprehension. Writing has been associated with birds since the beginning of recorded history. Thoth, the inventor of writing and language, was depicted with the head of the long-beaked ibis bird. Some Egyptologists believe the hieroglyphic language originated by tracing the movements of birds in the sky and on the ground. And scholars believe the first known style of writing, cuneiform, may have originated from bird tracks. It was also believed that certain holy men and sorcerers could converse with birds and thereby learn mystical secrets of nature. King Solomon, the Nordic warrior Siegfried, and Saint Francis of Assisi are some of the historical figures who are believed to have understood the language of the birds. The birds of alchemy. The alchemists spoke in the language of birds in the most literal sense, too. They used images of birds to stand for some of their most important concepts, especially those dealing with volatile or spiritual processes. The movements of birds are very significant in alchemical drawings. Ascending birds indicate the volatilization or evaporation of compounds, while descending birds indicate the fixation, condensation, or precipitation of compounds. Birds shown both ascending and descending indicate the operation of distillation. A standing bird usually indicates the kind of alchemical operation underway. See Part 3 of this book for a detailed explanation of the operations of alchemy. The crow or raven indicates black phase operations such as calcination or putrefaction, which involve the breaking down of structures by fire or decay. The white goose, white swan, or albatross stand for the white phase operations of separation and purification. The rooster or cockerel means the operation of conjunction is underway, and the peacock announces the beginning of the fermentation operation. Definition: volatile means something is easily changeable or transformed. Volatility is a measure of how quickly something changes. In alchemy, volatility is how easily a chemical evaporates or becomes spirited. The opposite of volatile is fixed, which means something is stable or unchanging. The pelican stands for the distillation operation as well as the beginning of the red phase of alchemy. The eagle also stands for distillation as well as the operation of sublimation. The color of the eagle sometimes indicates the color of the vapors being released during distillation. For instance, a white eagle represents steam. The Bennu bird or phoenix, the mythical bird that was reborn in the fire, stands for the final operation of coagulation and the creation of the philosopher's stone. Other bird symbolism in alchemy includes the double-headed eagle, which stands for the rebus or androgynous state of Mercury, and the bat, which also signifies dual-natured substances and androgyny. The dove is a symbol of renewed spirit or an infusion of divine energy. Chemically, the dove heralds the purifying transformation from the black phase to the white phase of alchemy. The basilisk is a symbolic alchemical creature with the head of a bird and the body of a dragon. According to legend, the wingless creature was hatched from a hermaphroditic cock's egg and nursed by a serpent. Chemically, the basilisk stands for the union of Mercury, the bird, and sulfur, the dragon, and the mineral cinnabar. Spiritually, it is the melding of our higher and lower natures of spirit, the bird, and soul, the dragon, to create a new incarnation or child of the philosophers. In alchemy, eggs in general are highly symbolic. They stand for any kind of sealed vessel of transformation, which includes not only closed glass vessels but also such unexpected things as coffins, tombs, and sepulchres. References to eggs and the hatching of birds and serpents abound. For instance, the alchemist's insulated fermenting box was referred to as the house of the chick, and the whole cosmos itself was sometimes depicted as a serpent hatching from or entwined around an egg. Another egg symbol, the griffin's egg, is an allusion to the vessel of Hermes, in which the conjunction, alchemical marriage, of volatile and fixed principles takes place. The griffin is a mythical beast that has the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle. Since the lion is considered the king of the beasts and the eagle the king of the birds, their union in the griffin makes it the most powerful and majestic animal imaginable. Animal symbolism in alchemy. While birds and flying animals generally indicate spiritual or volatile principles, terrestrial animals usually stand for physical or fixed principles. Whether two animals are found, they are sulfur and mercury or some relationship between fixed and volatile principles. Animals also symbolize basic principles of alchemy. For example, they may symbolize the four elements in drawings. The earth element is usually symbolized by an ox or lion, the water element by fish or whales, the air element by doves or eagles, and the fire element by salamanders or dragons. Serpents represent the life force or the energies being exchanged in alchemical transformations. Two entwined serpents represent the opposing masculine and feminine energies that make up life force, such as depicted in the caduceus, or the union of opposing substances in the lab. Three-headed serpents or three serpents in a group stand for the three principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt. Winged serpents represent volatile substances. Wingless serpents represent fixed substances. A crucified serpent represents the fixation of a volatile substance. In alchemical drawings, frogs and toads indicate the first matter, and the energies of materialization. The black toad symbolizes the first matter being released by the putrefaction of a substance. The chaining or tying together of a toad on the ground and an eagle in the sky represents the union of fixed and volatile components, such as silver and mercury, or soul and spirit. Other animal symbols include two fish swimming in opposite directions, which designate the essence of spirit and soul during the operation of dissolution. Bees, beetles, and butterflies are symbols of purification and the rebirth of soul or essence. The mythical unicorn was a symbol of sublimation and was associated with the white tincture and white powder of alchemy. The noble stag with large antlers was associated with the red tincture and red powder of alchemy. Scenes of the stag and unicorn meeting in the middle of a forest indicate the completion of the work and the successful creation of the Philosopher's Stone. Wolves symbolize the wild, untamed spirit of man, or the chaotic forces of nature. Dogs represent the domesticated spirit of man, or natural forces working to assist the alchemist. Chemically, the dog is philosophical mercury, or the purified benevolent spirit of the metal mercury. The gray wolf stands for the metal antimony. The gray wolf is a fearsome beast. When molten, it mercilessly devours other metals like lead, tin, and copper. Drawings showing dogs fighting with wolves represent the process of purifying gold with antimony, which was alloyed with other metals to remove them from gold. The lions of alchemy. Lions are important symbols, as they are usually associated with the properties of sulfur or the application of heat or acids to the metals. Chemically, the lion is any salt or fixed substance obtained from the metals. It is black, green, or red according to its state of transformation. The first of the lions is the black lion, which represents the black salt, lead ore, or in general the darkest part of a substance that must be purified and transformed by the fire. In working with minerals and metals, the green lion is the root of the essence of the metals, or soul of the metals. The green lion was known for devouring the metals. The chemical signature that gave it its green color was iron sulfate, and acids made with iron sulfate were called the green lion. These included vitriol or sulfuric acid, which dissolved most common metals such as iron and copper, and also nitric acid. When nitric acid was mixed with hydrochloric acid, it produced the greenish acid aqua regia, which could even dissolve gold. Images of the green lion devouring the sun refer to this ability. The green lion is also associated with the green acetate of lead in its oily or unredeemed form. When working with plant essence and vegetable matter, the green lion represented the life force in the leaves of plants. In this case, the green lion eating the sun is the process of photosynthesis that creates the greenness of nature from the pigment chlorophyll. Alchemists understood this process and tried to isolate the life force in plants to use these experiments and even create artificial life forms. At the next level of the work with animals, the red lion is the life force in blood. In the work with minerals and metals, the red lion is the red acetate of lead in its crystallized form. Generally, with the red lion, we gain control over untamed or unredeemed forces by feeding the green lion a seed of gold or purifying it with a catalyst or transmuting agent. Philosophically, the green lion is the raw forces of nature or the subconscious that we are seeking to tame, and the red lion is the assimilation or control of those forces. In the final stages of the work, the red lion grows wings. The winged lion is the volatile or spiritual aspect of a substance, which is the sublimated salt used to make the Philosopher's Stone. The dragons of alchemy. Dragons are another group of important symbols and represent the properties of mercury or the application of life force or energy. Chemically, the dragon is the mercury acid obtained from the metals or acids in general. Like lions, the alchemical dragon is black, green, or red according to its level of transformation. The black dragon is the blackened metallic compound undergoing putrefaction, death, and decay. The green dragon is the indwelling spirit or life of the metal, the thing that gives metals their active properties. Philosophically, the green dragon is a formerly ferocious and unforgiving dragon that is now tamed. Its energy is contained by having been crystallized. Formerly threatening unconscious elements have now been assimilated into consciousness. The red dragon appears at both the beginning and the end of the work. It is the chaotic energy of the first matter at the beginning of the work that becomes the philosopher's stone at the end of the work. Chemically, the red dragon is the pure red oil of lead in its initial state and the red powder of projection in its perfected or tamed state. From The Alchemist. A serpent or dragon eating its own tail is known as an Ouroboros or Ouroboros. It symbolizes the union of opposing energies and is one of the primary symbols for the Philosopher's Stone. The caption "All is One" is usually included with drawings of the Ouroboros. Alchemists sometimes refer to the Ouroboros as the Agathos Daemon, good spirit, which was another name for Thoth, the father of alchemy. A fire-breathing dragon or a dragon in flames indicates a metal melting or a substance undergoing calcination. Several dragons fighting amongst themselves depict metals undergoing the process of putrefaction. Dragons with wings represent the volatile, spirit, or energetic principle, and wingless dragons represent the fixed, soul, or material principle. The cyclic interplay of volatile and fixed, light and darkness, spirit and soul, energy and matter, creation and destruction, is rendered in drawings showing two dragons, one winged and the other with feet, each eating the other's tail. Silent Secrets of the Rose. No symbol inspired alchemists of the Renaissance more than the rose. The flower is one of the fundamental symbols of alchemy, and became the philosophical basis of the Rosicrucians, an alchemical movement that flourished in the 17th century. So important was it to alchemists that dozens of manuscripts are called Rosarium, Latin for rose garden, and all deal with the alchemical relationship between the king and the queen. The rose is much more meaningful, much older, and more deeply embedded in the human subconscious than most people believe. In Europe, rose fossils 35 million years old have been found, and archaeologists have unearthed petrified rose wreaths from the oldest Egyptian tombs. To understand the alchemist's fascination with the rose, let's take a deeper look into its complicated symbolism. The rose is a paradoxical symbol of both purity and passion, heavenly perfection and the earthly desire, and life and death. Originally a symbol of joy, the rose later indicated secrecy and silence, but is now commonly associated with romantic love. In general, the color of the rose denotes its meaning. Red roses are symbols of passion, soulful love, deep creativity, and high personal energy. White roses symbolize purity, innocence, acceptance, and unconditional love. Black or withered roses indicate that love is gone or over, as well as impending disaster, depression, or death. Pink roses stand for gentleness, thankfulness, and loving or supportive friendship. Yellow roses signify compassion, sociability, free-flowing conversations, confidence, and security. Orange roses carry feelings of enthusiasm, fascination, and optimism. Blue or purple roses indicate spiritual longing, meditation, and the promise of a perfect world. Gilded or golden roses convey the idea of personal perfection, completion of the great work, or the invocation of divine powers. In alchemical terms, the golden rose means a successful marriage of opposites to produce the golden child, and the rose in general is a symbol of the operation of conjunction, the mystical marriage of opposites. The rose represents the regeneration of purified essences and their resurrection in a new compound or body. The white rose is associated with the white queen of alchemy and represents the feminine, receptive, contractive principle of lunar soul. The red rose is associated with the red king and is regarded as a masculine, active, expansive principle of solar spirit. The rose-red color, said psychologist Carl Jung, is related to the aqua permanens, eternal water or blood of the soul, which are extracted from the first matter. The union of white and red roses, of soul and spirit, symbolizes the birth of the philosopher's child. Also, white roses were linked to the white phase of the work and the white stone of multiplication, while the red rose was associated with the red phase and the red stone of projection. From The Alchemist. Alchemist Daniel Meyer discussed the symbolism of the red in his Septimana Philosophica. The rose is the first and most perfect of flowers. The gardens of philosophy are planted with many roses, both red and white, which colors are in the correspondence with gold and silver. The center of the rose is green and is emblematical of the green lion or first matter. Such as the natural rose turns to the sun and is refreshed by rain, so is the philosophical matter prepared in blood, grown in light, and in and by these made perfect. In alchemical drawings, the rose garden is a symbol of sacred space and could mean a meditation chamber, oratorium in a lab. A sacred tabernacle, an altar, a sacred location in nature, or paradise itself. In all these instances, the rose garden is the mystical bridal chamber, the place of the mystic marriage. Mystery glows in the rose bed, and the secret is hidden in the rose, wrote the 20th century Persian alchemist Farid Attar. In Christian alchemy, the rose and the rosary become symbols of the union between God and human beings. Scenes of Mary in a rose garden or under a rose arbor or before a tapestry of roses reinforce this idea. In the art of the Middle Ages, Mary is almost always shown holding a rose, which indicates her power comes from divine love. In spiritual alchemy, the single rose represents the mystic center of a person, her heart of hearts. As a symbol of the mystical marriage within a person, the rose represents a special kind of love in which one melts away into the beauty of another and the old identity is surrendered for that of the beloved, or a higher identity discovered within oneself. Sufi spiritual alchemist Rumi had this idea in mind when he wrote, "In the driest, whitest stretch of pain's infinite desert, I lost my sanity and found this rose." In this sense, the rose is a symbol of complete surrender and permanent transmutation. Because of its association with the deepest workings of the heart, the rose has come to symbolize inner secrets and things that cannot be spoken. The Latin phrase sub rosa, under the rose, is used to indicate writings or discussions that should be kept secret. The concept originated in the medieval tradition of hanging red roses from the ceiling of meetings of hermetic organizations, such as the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, or alchemy guilds, to indicate that the discussions were not to be shared with outsiders. For instance, in Sebastian Brandt's 15th century alchemical treatise, Ship of Fools, the author warns, "What here we do say shall under roses stay." Ciphers of alchemists. Ciphers are symbolic glyphs used by alchemists to indicate chemicals, metals, and the basic principles and operations of their craft. Common ciphers used by alchemists are shown in the following figure. In the process of alchemical initiation, ciphers were used as coded teaching tools, and meditation on ciphers were thought to convey unspoken wisdom. The alchemist ciphers have much to say about the hidden meanings and archetypal power of the materials and operations. Definition. Archetypal refers to the influence of archetypes, which are elementary ideas rooted permanently in our consciousness. They are the divine ideals or spiritual essences from which existing objects or situations arise. Archetypes seem to be embedded in the fabric of creation and transcend all languages and cultures. They are primordial patterns that show up on all levels of reality and are most clearly described in myths and stories. As an exercise in deciphering ciphers, let's investigate a Renaissance drawing intended to help initiates penetrate the deeper meaning of the fundamental ciphers of alchemy. In the following figure, we see an esoteric schematic drawing imbued with archetypal influences. The sun, moon, and 15 stars look down over symbols centered on a tree trunk with a massive root system in the ground. To the right is a 5-petal flower indicating the presence of the quintessence, and on the left is a 7-branched plant indicating the steps or operations of perfection. On top of the tree is an eagle representing the operation of distillation, which in this case is the mental operation of distilling these symbols. It is a sign that we need to reflect or meditate on this drawing. Supporting the tree trunk are 2 lions, one with wings and one without. representing the union of the volatile and fixed faculties of spirit and soul, which we must use together to understand these symbols. In other words, we have to combine the masculine, logical, and argumentative way of knowing of spirit with the feminine, intuitive, and reflective way of knowing of soul. This is the key needed to decipher the coded material being presented. In fact, this is the key to understanding all the symbols of alchemy. Without this key, alchemy remains an obscure puzzle. In the drawing, we see two ciphers buried in the ground at the foot of the tree. These are the basic raw materials with which the alchemists work. On the left is the symbol for salt, which represents the physical compounds and chemicals alchemists use. On the right is the cipher for the first matter, which is the spirit matter of the work, the elusive source that exists between worlds. The cipher for the first matter can be shown in two orientations. Shown here as a cross in a circle, it signifies the purified or rectified first matter. If it were shown as an X in a circle, it would have signified the chaotic or unrefined first matter. The other ciphers in the drawing are arranged in the shape of a cross with horizontal and vertical components. In Hermetic geometry, horizontal lines and earthly orientation stand for material reality or things fixed in time and space. Vertical lines and heavenly orientation stand for energetic or spiritual forces that are not fixed in time and space. Ciphers for the elements. On the horizontal component of the cross are the ciphers for the 4 elements, which make up our material reality. On the left side of the tree trunk, the first cipher is fire, a triangle pointing upward. Fire seeks to ascend because of its hot and dry qualities. On the right side of the tree trunk, the first cipher is water, a triangle pointing downward. Water seeks to descend and condense because of its cold and moist qualities. Fire and water are the purest elements, and if allowed full expression of their urges, fire would disappear into the above and water would be absorbed into the below. Next to fire on the left is the cipher for earth, the downward pointing triangle cipher of water with a horizontal line through it. Next to water on the right is the cipher for air, the upward pointing triangle of fire with a horizontal line through it. In other words, earth is cold and dry and seeks to descend, but its dry component blocks its full descent, and the horizontal line in the triangle of water indicates this. Air is hot and moist and seeks to ascend, but its moist component blocks its full ascent, as is indicated by the horizontal line in the triangle of fire. Thus the elements of earth and air are suspended in time and space, caught between and connecting the extremes of above and below. In the Hermetic teachings, earth and air are considered more manifested and stable versions of the pure elements, water and fire. Ciphers for the 3 essentials. The triangular shape of the ciphers for the elements is not without significance. It indicates that the elements of creation are made up of 3 primordial forces present in the first matter and expressed in all created things. The alchemists called these 3 essential ingredients sulfur, mercury, and salt, and for now, we are concerned only with the ciphers the alchemists chose to represent them. In the drawing, the ciphers for the 3 essentials are arranged vertically on the trunk of the tree. This orientation indicates these are archetypal forces from above, not fixed in time and space. At the bottom of the tree nearest the ground is the cipher of heavenly salt. This is the same cipher as the one for terrestrial or physical salt. While vertical orientation indicates spiritual processes, horizontal orientation indicates physical processes. Thus, the horizontal line through the salt cipher suggests its materiality or tendency to form bodies. Tread carefully. The way alchemists capitalize words can sometimes be confusing. In general, a capitalized word refers to spiritual or archetypal connotations, while the uncapitalized version refers to physical or everyday connotations. For instance, salt with a capital S stands for the heavenly substance or universal principle of materialization, while salt with a lowercase s refers to the common physical compound. Sometimes the term sophic was used to emphasize the spiritual or philosophical aspect of a substance. Thus, sophic mercury was the spiritual ideal of the common metal mercury. The next cipher up the tree trunk is for sulfur. It consists of the cipher for fire with a cross attached beneath it. The cross indicates the fire element is being expressed along both the horizontal, material, and the vertical, spiritual axis of reality. Common sulfur is known as brimstone, literally the burning stone, and carries the signatures of the fire element. Above the cipher for sulfur and at the same level as the horizontal line of elements is the cipher for mercury. Mercury's position on the cross of ciphers is significant as it is the transforming medium that exists in both material and spiritual realms. This is also indicated by the cross at the base of the cipher. The curved line or semicircle at the top of the cipher stands for the moon. The semicircle or crescent is the cipher for the moon as well as for silver. Thus, the cipher for Mercury results from a union of the sun and the moon, which in alchemy means just one thing. It is the sacred marriage, the union of the king and the queen within, the merging of masculine and feminine, ways of knowing, and the creation of the philosopher's stone. The cipher for the philosopher's stone is shown above Mercury at the top of the tree. It is a circle with a cross above it. It means that this object has power over all realms, both material and spiritual. The least you need to know. Alchemists communicated in a secret coded language of metaphors and symbols known as the language of the birds. Bird symbols in alchemy stand for spiritual principles as well as stages of work. Lions in alchemy represent the properties of sulfur and the use of heat and sulfuric compounds with the metals. Dragons in alchemy represent the properties of mercury and the use of mercuric compounds with the metals. The rose is one of the most profound symbols in alchemy, and its meaning changes with the color of the flower. The ciphers of alchemy were deliberately designed to invoke secret or esoteric principles. Chapter 6. The Elusive First Matter. In this chapter, the enigma of the first matter, philosophy of the first matter, characteristics of the first matter, and how alchemists worked with the first matter. The first matter, prima materia in Latin, is the most confusing concept in alchemy, and even alchemists had a difficult time defining it. The 1612 edition of the Lexicon of Alchemy lists over 80 different definitions for the first matter, and at least 200 different descriptions of it are found in the writings of medieval alchemists. Among the popular synonyms for the first matter were such alchemical concepts as fire, water, air, earth, sulfur, mercury, salt, quintessence, the sun, the moon, and the stone. Also included were philosophical ideals like imagination, love, light, consciousness, thought, spirit, soul, and God. Even such terms as blood, urine, menses, manure, and dirt were considered fitting definitions by alchemists. The reason the first matter is so hard to pin down is that it is everything and nothing at once. It is the primal one thing that existed before time, as well as the primordial chaos that contains all possibilities. It is said the first matter carries the germ or seeds of all things that ever existed and ever will exist in the future. It is the infinite cornucopia from which the myriad of all created things in the universe emerge. Yet this unbelievably elusive and potent cosmic force was the subject of the alchemists' work as they tried to accumulate it in its pristine form from natural sources and expose it in metals and other compounds through their chemical manipulations. They sought it deep in underground mines and in the black virgin soil in the middle of forests. They carefully spread out burlap bags to collect the morning dew, which they believed held traces of the first matter. They even distilled hundreds of gallons of children's urine seeking the magical essence. They looked for it everywhere, including in their own bodies, minds, and souls. What is the first matter? The Emerald Tablet refers to the first matter as the one thing, the primordial chaos of the universe fashioned into material reality by the thoughts or word of the one mind. This idea of a divine presence seeking expression in the material universe seems to have originated with the ancient Egyptians and has become a basic tenet of Hermetic philosophy. The Egyptians denoted the first matter with the hieroglyph known as KH, which looks like a circle with two wide horizontal black bands running through it. This cipher for the first matter is the first hieroglyphic letter that makes up the Egyptian word Kem, which is the root of our word alchemy. It is also the only hieroglyph that no traditional Egyptologist knows the meaning of for sure. Other hieroglyphs are associated with a common item such as a basket, stool, owl, vulture, and so on. But this particular symbol has both tangible and intangible nuances. The easiest definition is black matter that is alive. But what exactly is that? Most language experts have translated as placenta, but others feel it might mean fertile dirt or living black soil. In fact, it is the holy script for the first matter, the basic dark matter of the universe from which all things have sprung. The ancients thought of the first matter as a spiritual substance of which external visible nature is an expression and manifestation. This primordial matter contains the powers that form minerals and metals, vegetables and animals, and everything that breathes. All forms are hidden within its depths, and it is therefore the true principle or beginning of all things. In ancient China, philosophers referred to the first matter as the Tao, which is an equally difficult term to describe. The Chinese spiritual alchemist Lao Tzu considered the Tao as plural in manifestation but singular in essence. Totally real yet totally unknowable, a non-personal, amoral, primordial chaos. He described it in the Tao Te Ching. There is a thing confusedly formed, born between heaven and earth. Silent and void, it stands alone and does not age, yet goes round and does not weary. It is capable of being the mother of the world. The Tao is the unborn origin of the universe, the chaotic source of all that exists between heaven and earth. Western alchemists depicted the first matter as the Ouroboros, or Ouroboros, which is a serpent or dragon eating its own tail. In alchemical drawings, sometimes two serpents or dragons were shown, with a lighter winged serpent above and a darker walking serpent below. The interplay between these two primordial principles is the engine that drives reality, that creates the singular force behind the evolutionary perfection of the universe. From The Alchemist. Psychologist Carl Jung commented on the psychological meaning of the Ouroboros in his Mysterium Conjunctionis. In the age-old image of the Ouroboros lies the thought of devouring oneself and tuning oneself into a circulatory process, for it was clear to the more astute alchemist the prima materia of the art was man himself. The Ouroboros is a dramatic symbol for the integration and assimilation of the opposite, i.e., the shadow. This feedback process is at the same time a symbol of immortality, since it is said of the Ouroboros that he slays himself and brings himself to life, fertilizes himself, and gives birth to himself. To alchemists, the first matter is a primordial, unorganized state of energy or proto-matter that is the same for all substances and exists in an unmanifested state between energy and matter. The chaos or energy of the first matter is organized or directed by the light of consciousness. Hermetic philosophers believe the whole universe came into being because of an image, thought, or word projected by the divine mind of God in the fabric of the universe, the first matter. Unfortunately, our culture has rejected the concept of the first matter. For us, things are either real or not real. We have no room in our thinking for the gray area of reality between manifested and unmanifested, where the first matter exists. For this reason, the alchemist often referred to the first matter as the cornerstone the builders forgot. That is why rejected things like feces, manure, urine, and even the shadowy dark desires and beliefs we shove into our unconscious are symbols of the first matter. Properties of the first matter. Down through the ages, alchemists have written about the characteristics of the first matter in an attempt to help identify, accumulate, and transform the mysterious substance. In the following sections, I've brought together some of these descriptions. The first matter is eternal. The first matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. The amount of first matter in the universe is fixed, permanent, and unaffected by time. Modern alchemists associate it with dark matter, which the equations of physics say makes up most of the universe but cannot be detected. Physicists believe dark matter is responsible for the basic structure of the universe and have proven that billions of bits of the invisible matter stream through our bodies every second. The first matter is everywhere to be found. Because the first matter is the source of all things, it is present everywhere and in all things. To find the first matter, you must search in the twilight area between manifested and unmanifested reality. Scholars call the kind of space in which the first matter appears a liminal location, which means anything at the edge, crossroads, or threshold where normal boundaries fade away. Thoth's tips. Check out J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series of books for many subtle descriptions of the first matter. For instance, the in-between or liminal aspect of the first matter is captured in the invisible train platform 9 3/4 located in King's Cross Station, between platforms 9 and 10. Rowling is saying that even in the most common and everyday situations, the magical possibilities of the first matter are available to us if we only break free of our muggle-headed preconceptions and see the world as the alchemists saw it. The first matter is cyclic. Both Eastern and Western alchemists understood the cyclic nature of the first matter and believed it changed into all things light and dark, manifested and unmanifested, in a grand pattern of transformation. In the West, the Ouroboros, the dragon eating its own tail, symbolized this idea. The Eastern symbol for this process is the Tai Chi or yin-yang diagram, which depicts the spinning forces of darkness, yin matter, and light, yang or mind, each containing the seed of the other and constantly changing into one another. Yin is seen as the feminine, passive, and satisfied in its existence, while yang is seen as masculine, active, and hungry. The first matter contains all the elements. The first matter contains all the components of creation, including the 4 elements and the quintessence. The alchemists believe that the actual form the first matter takes when it manifests into a material substance depends on the proportions of the 4 elements being expressed. The elements can be changed into each other, and this manipulation of a substance's first matter is what transforms it. The first matter is the source of the Philosopher's Stone. The first matter was believed to be the only thing from which the Philosopher's Stone could be prepared, and as far back as the Alexandrian alchemist Zosimos, alchemists stated that once the first matter was known and purified, it became the much sought-after stone. The German alchemist Heinrich Kunrath described the first matter as the true light of nature, which guides and illuminates all seekers after divine truth. "It is in the world," he wrote, "and the whole edifice of the world is beautifully adorned and will be naturally preserved by it. But the world knows it not. Above all, it is the subject of the great stone of the philosophers which the world has before its eyes and yet knows it not." Working with the first matter. No alchemical process of transformation, whether in the laboratory, in the body, or in the soul, can succeed without the participation of the elusive ingredient of the first matter. Certainly, nothing was more important to an alchemist's work than this spiritized essence. The alchemists made it clear in their writings that by applying the grades of fire with which they worked, they could extricate the first matter from any substance and render it tangible and visible. Alchemists, in their attempts to change base metals into gold, developed most of the laboratory methods of working with the first matter. The idea behind their work is fairly simple. Strip a metal of the gross qualities and physical properties that identify it, and it yields the one primitive matter. That is the same for all metals. Next, impose the appropriate new qualities upon the primitive matter, and the desired new substance is attained. So the metals all originate from the same matrix, which is their first matter. The metals are similar in their essence and differ only in their form, wrote Albertus Magnus of Alchemy. In another work, he added, "One may pass easily from one metal to another, following a circle." The modern atomic theory of matter expresses a strikingly similar conclusion. The first matter can be exposed and accumulated from any material if that material is completely dissolved and broken down into its most fundamental essences. The Alexandrian alchemists believed all one had to do to accomplish this was to divest a material of the gross physical properties represented by fire, water, air, and earth. However, reducing a substance to its first matter was always a difficult task, although some materials, such as dew and fertile black earth, released their first matter easier than other substances. Trying to extract the first matter from a substance represented months of hard work, roasting, pulverizing, dissolving, and breaking down materials said to contain large amounts of the mysterious essence. Alchemists also referred to the first matter as the mercury of the philosophers, because they believed the essence or soul of all metals was mercury, and therefore spent much effort trying to extract the first matter from mercury. Tread carefully. If you attempt to find the first matter, whether in nature, in the lab, or within yourself, beware of its awesome power. The alchemists described the first matter as a poisonous dragon whose fire can instantly reduce us to ashes, yet is also the egg of nature and a source of tremendous transformative energy. The secret is to acknowledge the mystery and the power of the first matter and work with it slowly and reverently. But if you look this dragon in the face and attempt to take control of it, you will be destroyed. The alchemists often referred to the hidden essence of first matter in a substance as its inner star. An appearance of the first matter are often accompanied by displays of light. In this sense, the first matter is the anima mundi, or soul of the world, and is present in all things. Alchemists believe the first matter also existed in the human body as the eternal star, which we call the soul. The spiritual work in alchemy focused on purifying and rectifying the first matter within and thereby perfecting the very soul of the alchemist. The least you need to know. The first matter gave the universe its properties and existed before our concepts of time and space. The first matter exists on the borderline between manifested and unmanifested reality. The first matter is best understood as the spiritized essence or soul of a substance that gives it its identity, form, and function. The first matter is chaotic and fluid, constantly changing into an opposite in a cosmic play of creation and destruction. Chapter 7, The Four Elements. In this chapter, 4 elements in the first matter, theories of the elements, the 4 humors, the square of opposition, the 5th element, the quintessence, and the 4 kinds of fire. The theory of the 4 elements arose out of early philosophers' fascination with the concept of the first matter. While the first matter exists in a state of utter chaos and potential, for the universe to exist at all, the first matter at some point has to become organized. According to the Emerald Tablet, the organizing principle is the one mind, which projects the vibration of the word into the chaos to bring about the creation of the world. In order for the first matter to take on form or manifest into space, philosophers held the general feeling that it had to take on a 4-fold structure. The basic forces that create this fundamental cubic structure of space have come to be called the 4 elements. Most Western alchemists used the Greek system of elements, which consisted of earth, water, air, and fire. The Greek word for element, stoichion, literally means letter of the alphabet. The idea is that the elements are the building blocks of the words, or thoughts, of the creator. In studying the 4 elements, keep in mind that they are not our everyday ideas of earth, water, air, and fire, which are only the specific physical expressions of their respective archetypes. The elements are really spiritual essences and originate in the higher realm above, where they represent perfect images or cosmic ideals. In the Hermetic teachings, the 4 elements result from the materialization of light or imagery within the divine one mind of the universe. The concept of the elements. Contrary to popular belief, several pre-Socratic Greek philosophers proposed that classical 4 elements independently and not all together at once. Thales first proposed that water was the root of creation. Then Anaximenes added air, Xenophanes added earth to the list, and finally Heraclitus proposed that fire was among the fundamental building blocks of nature. Not until Empedocles proposed that they had all existed together in fixed quantities since the beginning of time, did the theory come together as we know it. In his book, Doctrine of the Four Roots, Empedocles stated that all matter emerges from the four roots of the earth: water, air, and fire. In his view, fire and air are expansive, outwardly reaching constants of nature, reaching up and out, whereas earth and water are contractive and turn inward and downward. To show their archetypal power, Empedocles associated each essence with a god. Hera rules the fruitful earth, he wrote. Hades rules the central fire, Zeus the luminescent air, and Persephone the mollifying water. Empedocles believed these four parts of creation were animated through the interaction of two great living energies he called love and strife. Love he associated with the goddess Aphrodite, and strife with the god of war, Ares. This idea is very similar to the Eastern tradition of yin and yang, with yin being the passive, feminine energy of love, and yang being the aggressive masculine energy of strife. In alchemy, these two contrary principles became known as the king and queen, and this simple view explained nearly every aspect of the Greek world. Plato reiterated the archetypal nature of the four elements by describing them as idea forms that had a separate and real existence. He also discovered that the elements were not static, but could transform or go over into one another. For instance, water freezes to ice, being like a stone or earth, yet it evaporates to vapor or becomes air. From The Alchemist. The four elements in astrology describe the basic nature or temperament of each sign of the zodiac. In general, earth is connected to the body and practical considerations, water with feelings and emotions, air with thoughts and imagination, and fire with energy and activity. The signs that express the earth element are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. The water element is dominant in Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and the fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Aristotle first used the word element, and the Alexandrian alchemists popularized it. And Aristotle further developed the theories of Empedocles and Plato by explaining the four elements as combinations of two sets of opposing qualities of hot and cold, wet and dry. Water is cold and wet, earth is cold and dry, air is hot and wet, and fire is hot and dry. This concept became the foundation upon which Western alchemists based their theories and practices. Aristotle postulated that wet and dry are the primary qualities of matter. Wet, or moistness, is the quality of fluidity or flexibility, which allows a thing to adapt to its external conditions, whereas dry or dryness is the quality of rigidity, which allows a thing to define its own shape and bounds. As a consequence, wet things tend to be volatile and expansive because they can fill spaces in their surroundings. Dry things are fixed and structured because they define their own form. From The Alchemist. Polish alchemist Michael Sędziwogius expressed the alchemical view of the elements in his book, The Water Which Does Not Wet the Hands. There are four common elements, and each has at its center another deeper heavenly element which makes it what it is. They were each in the beginning evolved and molded out of chaos of first matter by the hand of the Creator. And it is their contrary action which keeps up the harmony and equilibrium of the mundane machinery of the universe. In Aristotle's view, each of the four elements has its natural place. He placed the earth element at the center of the physical universe, and then arranged water, air, and fire in increasing subtlety around it. When an element is out of its natural place, it has an innate tendency to return to its level. Thus, bodies sink in water, air bubbles up, rain falls, and flames rise. Aristotle added a fifth element to his philosophical system to explain the actions of the planets and stars. He called it the ether element and said it was what the heavens were made of. The alchemists refer to the fifth element as the quintessence, which comes from a Latin phrase meaning fifth essence. By adding the fifth element, Aristotle brought Western alchemy into agreement with Chinese and Indian versions of the elements. Aristotle also predicted that one substance could be transformed into another by altering the mix of its archetypal elements and their qualities, and this made understanding the elements and their qualities of primary importance to the alchemists. Aristotle's elegant view was the accepted philosophy of matter throughout the Middle Ages. The four humors. The Greek physician and father of modern medicine, Hippocrates, further developed the theory of the four elements. He viewed the elements as bodily fluids he called humors. He associated fire with the choleric humor of yellow bile, which is carried in cholesterol as a byproduct of digestion in the body. Choleric people tend to be energetic, enthusiastic, and constantly moving. In Aristotle's view, such people are hot and dry. He associated water with the phlegmatic humor of phlegm, which represents the clear fluids of the body carried by the lymphatic system and secreted by the mucous membranes. The phlegmatic person is cold and wet in Aristotle's terms and tends to be in touch with his feelings, yet can be moody and brooding. People in whom the phlegmatic humor is dominant tend to be flowing and flexible, oriented toward emotional harmony and let their feelings guide them. He associated air with the sanguine humor of the blood, which distributes oxygen throughout the tissues of the body. The word sanguine refers to a ruddy complexion in which the blood flows close to the skin. Sanguine people tend to be very changeable and even flighty, a little irritable yet basically optimistic, and full of personal integrity. According to Aristotle, such people are hot and wet in their elemental qualities, which produces a melding of intellect and emotions. He associated earth with the melancholic humor of black bile, which probably refers to waste products associated with digestion, such as stool, from which useful energy has been removed, leaving only the dregs of matter behind. Melancholic people tend to be apathetic, passive, stubborn, sluggish, yet practical. Because earth is the principle of structure and materialization, the melancholic humor is dominant in the person who focuses on physical reality and tends to exhibit the qualities of perseverance, inflexibility, realism, and pragmatism. In Aristotle's terms, such people are cool and dry. Hippocrates' theory of the four humors survives today in psychologist Carl Jung's theory of personality types. Jung saw the four elements as archetypes existing in the collective subconscious and are thus present in everyone. Like Aristotle, he considered fire and air the active masculine elements and water and earth the passive feminine elements. Thoth's tips. The looser color personality profile offers a way of relating to the elements as colors. The fire color red invokes excitement and passion. The water color blue encourages relaxation and tranquility. The air color yellow brings out qualities of mind and imagination. The earth color green elicits natural balance and practicality. Balancing the elements. Empedocles noted that those who had near equal expressions of the four elements in their personalities were more intelligent and had the truest perceptions of reality. Carl Jung noted the same thing in his Patience and called the balancing of the elements in a person integration. Aristotle's theory of the elements implied a scheme of transformation in which one element could be changed into another. Because the four elements came into being by impressing their opposing qualities of hot and cold and dry and wet on the first matter, it follows that one element can change into another by altering these basic qualities. For instance, when we impose the qualities of wet and cold on the first matter, the water element results. But if we change the quality of cold for that of hot, such as what happens when we boil water, it transforms into air or steam. By manipulating this simple relationship between a substance's inherent qualities, we can change one thing into another. We can visualize this scheme of transformation in Aristotle's square of opposition, which depicts all the relationships between the qualities and the elements. Opposing elements form a cross within the square, and each element is composed of two qualities shown in the corners of the square. Thus, earth is dry and cold, water is cold and wet, air is wet and hot, and fire is hot and dry. The qualities form a diagonal cross of opposition within the square. The alchemists considered the square of opposition a dynamic rotating machine that was in constant motion. like a video. In other words, changes in the qualities of the elements cause movement through the square. Or we could say that the strife between opposites is the motor of rotation. Cold becomes hot, hot becomes cold, wet becomes dry, and dry becomes wet. We call this movement the rotation of the elements. It is clear that generation of the elements will be circular, explained Aristotle, and this mode of change is very easy because corresponding qualities are present in adjacent elements. This natural circulation of the elements in the square of opposition begins with the process of adaptation, or water, and continues through expansion, or air, production, fire, and retraction, or earth. We can see the same pattern of movement through the elements in many elemental rotations, including the seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall, the ages of man, childhood, youth, maturity, and old age, and the cyclic rise and fall of nations and ideas. Hot, or heat, in the upper left-hand corner of the square of opposition is the primary quality, and fire at the top of the square is the most active element. The alchemists saw fire as the most important agent of transformation. So important was fire to the alchemists that they often referred to themselves as philosophers of fire. Water at the bottom of the square of opposition is the most passive element and represents the agent of coagulation or materialization in the current situation. Air and earth were considered secondary elements made up of different qualities of fire and water. The Greeks believed air was a combination of the hot quality of fire and the wet quality of water, and earth was a combination of the cold quality of water and the dry quality of fire. 4 rules determine movement within the square of opposition. Movement progresses in a clockwise rotation, starting at fire, which is where the work of transformation begins. As one moves through the square, each element follows its dominant quality. Therefore, fire is predominantly hot, earth is predominantly dry, water is predominantly cold, and air predominantly wet or humid. The qualities drive the elemental rotation of the turning square: hot on the top, dry on the descending side, cold on the bottom, and wet on the rising side. Because we can only move around and not across the square of opposition, direct transformation of opposing elements into one another is not possible. Thus, water cannot be transformed directly into fire because they have no common quality. However, water can be transformed by first changing it into one of the secondary elements of air or earth. Then, air or earth can be transformed into fire. The qualities are inversely proportional to each other. That means that the higher the intensity of an earlier quality in the rotation, the greater the rate of increase in the following opposite quality. Or, the higher the intensity of a later quality in the rotation, the more the preceding complementary quality decreases. For instance, increasing the hot quality increases dryness and decreases wetness. To illustrate this concept, let's work through one complete cycle starting at Earth. An increase in heat causes Earth to melt and take on the characteristics of water. Further heating, however, decreases the cold of the water component and increases its hot quality, which makes it boil and turn into steam or air. When air is heated, its moisture is reduced, and it rises higher into fire. When fire becomes cold, it loses its heat and becomes ashes or earth again. Whenever 2 elements share a common quality, the element in which the quality is not dominant is overcome by the one in which it is dominant. This property is known as the cycle of triumphs, and was first noticed by Spanish alchemist Raymond Lully. For example, when water combines with earth, earth is overcome because both are cold, but cold dominates in water. Therefore, water overcomes earth, and the result will be predominantly cold. According to this scheme, fire overcomes air, air overcomes water, water overcomes earth, and earth overcomes fire. Using the square of opposition to transform things is really quite simple when you work through it a few times. The archetypal relationship between the elements are so plainly depicted in the square of opposition that it's an amazingly versatile tool for all kinds of transformation. The alchemists used these same relationships and progressed through the square of opposition, whether they were doing laboratory experiments, producing medicines, or working on their own personal transformations. To use the square of opposition in your own transformation, you must first meditate on the qualities of the elements to know how they are expressed in your personality or temperament. To balance your dominant element, find its opposite on the cross within the square. You want to increase the presence of this neglected element to balance your temperament. However, because they are opposite and cannot be changed directly into one another, you must work through one of the adjacent elements. For example, if in your personality your dominant element is water, and you need to balance it with more fire, begin by working with the adjacent element, air or earth, with which you are the most comfortable or which is more dominant in you. If you choose the more spiritual path of air, you need to work to increase the quality of wetness, which means becoming more flowing and allowing emotional energy to surface. If you choose the more material path of earth, you need to do the opposite and try to become less flowing, more grounded, and more controlling of emotional energy. The choice of which path to follow obviously requires some insight about the true nature of your inner self. One of the dark secrets about the square of opposition is that it's possible to work with the reverse, counterclockwise rotation. This is known as the death rotation. The Byzantine emperor and alchemist Heraclitus described the process thus: fire lives in the death of earth. Air lives in the death of fire. Water lives the death of air. And earth lives the death of water. So the death rotation is a process of sacrificing one element to give life to another, and in its applications requires the use of negative imagery and negative energies. In his book Purifications, Empedocles used this reverse notation as a kind of personal crucifixion to cleanse the soul of broken promises, crimes against humanity, and other bad karma. This torturous personal alchemy demanded extreme awareness and brutal honesty, and required the alchemist to direct negative energies like anger and disgust inwards. Empedocles warned it was so cosmic a process that it might last through numerous rebirths and go on for thrice 10,000 years in the soul of the alchemist. The quintessence. We call the mysterious quintessence of the alchemist the fifth element, not because it was considered one of the elements, but because it lay beyond the elements in both form and function. The quintessence was viewed as something new and unexpected in creation that transcended the limitations imposed by the four elements. As Isaac Newton put it, the quintessence is a thing that is spiritual, penetrating, tinging, and incorruptible, which emerges anew from the four elements when they are bound together. The quintessence partakes of both material and spiritual realities and is described as a luminous light that is invisible to ordinary sight. Like Pythagoras before him, the alchemical philosopher Paracelsus believed that quintessence is what the stars are made of, and that within everything there exists a hidden star that is that thing's quintessence. From The Alchemist. Alchemist Benedictus Figulus described the quintessence in this book, The Golden Casket. For the elements are composed of a subtle substance diffused through their parts. This spirit fertilizes or brings to life all subjects, natural and artificial, pouring into them those hidden properties we call the fifth essence or quintessence, which the fount of medicine, the elixir of life, and restoration of health, and in this may be the cherished renewal of lost youth and serene health be found. The idea of the quintessence is part of the perennial philosophy and is present in every spiritual tradition. In Chinese alchemy, the fifth element is wood, which is a product of the plant kingdom and associated with the life force. In Taoist alchemy, the quintessence is known as qi, which is an unseen energy that flows through the body and can be accumulated and directed in moving meditations such as performed in Tai Chi and Qi Kung. In Tantric alchemy, the quintessence is the kundalini or sexual energy coiled like a sleeping serpent at the base of the spine. In Hindu alchemy, the quintessence is the spirit of breath, known in Sanskrit as prana. This is very similar to the Western concepts of the spirit of air known as pneuma in Greek and ruach in Hebrew. Philosophers of fire. To the alchemists, fire was the most important element, and they considered it the universal agent of transformation that made alchemy possible. Alchemy is only that which makes the impure pure by means of fire, said Paracelsus. Though not all fires do burn, it is, however, only fire, and continues to be fire, that interests us. Alchemists recognize 4 grades or types of fire with which they perform their transformations. Let's take a closer look at each. Elementary fire. The lowest grade of fire is known as the elementary fire, which is the common fire we are all familiar with. The elementary fire, which is the fire of our stoves, wrote the French philosopher alchemist Antoine Joseph Pernety in 1758, is impure, thick, and burning. This fire is sharp and corrosive, often ill-smelling, and is known through the senses. It has for its abode the surface of the earth and our atmosphere, and is destructive. It wounds the senses, it burns, it digests, concocts, and produces nothing other than heat. It is external to the alchemist and separating. Celestial fire. The highest grade of fire is the celestial fire, which is the brilliant white fire that issues forth from the one mind of God and represents the power of divine will. The celestial fire is very pure, simple, and not burning in itself, said Pernety. It has for its sphere the ethereal region, whence it makes itself known even to us. Celestial fire shines without burning, and is without color and odor. It is gentle and known only by its operations. Central fire. Between the lowest and highest grades of fire are 2 more kinds. One is the central fire, hidden within matter at its very center. Central fire is the fire of creation, the embedded word of God in all manifested objects. According to Pernety, the celestial fire passes into the nature of the central fire. It becomes internal, engendering in matter. It is invisible, and therefore known only by its qualities. The central fire is lodged in the center of matter. It is tenacious and innate in matter. It is digesting, maturing, neither warm nor burning to the touch. Secret fire. Alchemists rarely speak of the 4th grade of fire, even though they consider it the primary fire with which the true alchemist works. They refer to it only as their secret fire. The fire of the sun could not be this secret fire, hence Pernety. It is unequal and does not penetrate. The fire of our stoves, which consumes the constituent parts of matter, could not be the one. The central fire, which is innate in matter, cannot be that secret fire so much praised, because this heat is very different within the 3 kingdoms. The animal possesses in it much higher degree than the plant. The true nature of the secret fire has been concealed in myths and legends down through the ages. In allegories and fables, Pernety confirms, the philosophers have given to this secret fire the names of sword, lance, arrows, javelin, etc. It is the fire which Prometheus stole from heaven, which Vulcan employed to form the thunderbolts of Jupiter and the golden throne of Zeus. From Pernety's clues, maybe we can figure out the truth about the secret fire. It seems the secret fire has a direction or evolution and behaves with purpose like a sword or arrow. We also know that animals possess more of it than plants, and that is an ancient secret passed down from alchemist to alchemist in myths and legends. Let's look for more clues. Franz Hartmann, a 19th century German physician, was another alchemist who wrote openly about the secret fire. In his book Alchemy, he admitted, "The secret fire of the alchemists is sometimes described as a serpentine working power in the body of the ascetic. It is an electric fiery hidden power, an electro-spiritual force and creative power." Any alchemist worth his salt knows what the code word serpentine means. Since the days of Thoth and Hermes, the serpent has symbolized the life force, the basic animating energy that finds expression in our sexuality and state of health. The life force is the quintessence of matter, the hidden 5th element, the inner divine spark that makes all things come alive. We have just cracked one of the greatest secrets of alchemy. The secret fire of the alchemists is the life force itself, and it is an important ingredient in their work. It is something the alchemist tries to accumulate, control, and add to his experiments. The least you need to know. The four elements are archetypes or idealized essences expressed in the manifested world as common earth, water, air, and fire. Aristotle was responsible for bringing earlier concepts of the elements together into one cohesive theory that allowed for the transformation of one element into another. The square of opposition is a diagram of the relationships of the elements and how they can be transformed. The fifth element, or the quintessence, is equated with the life force in most traditions. The four grades of fire in alchemy are elementary fire, celestial fire, central fire, and secret fire. Chapter 8, The Three Essentials. In this chapter, the three-headed dragon of the first matter, doctrine of the two contraries, the three philosophical substances, the three essentials within all of us, the three treasures of Taoist alchemy. The three essentials are the trinity of forces that make up creation, and the alchemists name them sulfur, mercury, and salt. Sulfur and mercury are the primordial opposites that are part of the inherent duality of the universe. We have only to observe nature to see this fundamental duality, which can be expressed as masculine and feminine, positive and negative, light and dark, expanding and contracting, energy and matter, yang and yin, and many other names depending on our perspective. Salt, on the other hand, is the static result or resolving force created by the union of sulfur and mercury. In alchemy, salt is associated with the philosopher's child and considered the principle of form or structure. The alchemists saw salt at work in the formation of fetuses and the growth of plants, as well as in the formation of chemical compounds and in processes like precipitation and crystallization. Salt is active anywhere a new body forms. All created things consist of sulfur, mercury, and salt, and alchemical procedures can break everything down into these three principles. To differentiate them from the mundane substances of the same name, the alchemists always capitalized the names of the three essentials in their writings. Sometimes they clearly designated them philosophical or sophic substances and called them sophic sulfur, sophic mercury, and sophic salt. Three children of the first matter. According to alchemy philosophy, the three essentials emerge into creation from a common source, the first matter. The three-headed serpent or dragon, which is a symbol of the first matter, captured this idea. In a scenario that mirrors our modern concept of the Big Bang, alchemists believe the three essentials were born from the chaotic darkness of the first matter into our universe in a tremendous burst of energy and light. Thoth's tips. The three essentials are so important in alchemy that generally any grouping of three things in drawings or discussions refers to these three universal principles. They were also known as the three supernals, the Supreme Trinity, the three Principia, the three universals, the three treasures, the three magisteriums, and the tria prima, Latin for the first three. Once created, the three essentials are indistinguishable from the first matter in their powers of transformation, and their primal interaction is responsible for myriad manifested things in our world. At the end of the great work, the three essentials are reunited and integrally fused into the Philosopher's Stone. The alchemist's motto conveyed this idea. The stone is single in essence, but triple in form. Not surprisingly, the three-headed serpent or dragon is also a symbol of the Philosopher's Stone, although there are distinct differences in attitude and coloring when compared to the beast of the first matter. Somehow, the first matter itself has been transformed. We are beginning to get a glimpse of the big picture in alchemy. The great work begins with the emergence of the first matter and ends with the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. Furthermore, the first matter and the Philosopher's Stone are composed of the same three essential ingredients. The great work is nothing more than the rectification of the first matter into the Philosopher's Stone. Definition. Rectification is an alchemical term that literally means to set right. and implies that the original substance was corrupt or imperfect. Chemical rectification is a process of refining by repeated distillations or purification using filters or membranes that separate out impurities. To rectify a system means to set all energy currents working in the same direction. Rectification of light results in intense, coherent, tightly focused, single-frequency beam. These are all fitting descriptions of the creation of the stone. The two contraries. The roots of the alchemist's theory of sulfur and mercury lie in an ancient doctrine known as the two contraries. The two contraries were seen as reciprocal principles of nature, usually described as male and female or active and passive. Symbolized by the sun and moon, they were an expression of the fundamental natural law of reproduction. Originating in Egypt in the myths of Isis and Osiris, the doctrine of the two contraries eventually spread to Babylonia and China. Although the two opposing principles took on a variety of names, they always shared the same characteristics of the original myth. Isis was the moon goddess, the feminine, receptive, reflective, productive principle of nature. Osiris was the sun god, the masculine, aggressive, penetrating source of energy and identity. Their child was Horus, who became the symbol for all new birth, growth, the green earth, and transformation in general. Among Alexandrian alchemists, the principle of the sun, or Osiris, became linked with sulfur, and the principle of the moon, or Isis, became linked with mercury. Their child Horus would eventually become associated with the alchemical substance of salt. The archetypal principles of the sun and moon, represented by Osiris and Isis, were thought to give rise to all things, and the concept that all things are engendered through the union of these two opposing forces took root among alchemists around the world. Alchemists in ancient India believed the metals were born of the union of the gods, Hara and Parvati, through the powers of Agni, the god of fire. Sulfur was Agni, Mercury was the semen of Hara, and the crucible of earth in which their union occurred was Parvati. In China, the doctrine of the two contraries arose from the Taoist concept of the Tao, or first matter. Around 300 BCE, the concept of the Tao changed to include the two opposing qualities of Yang and Yin. Yang was masculine, positive, expansive, solar, and fiery, and Yin was feminine, negative, contractive, lunar, and watery. Yang was light and tended to rise into the sky. Yin was heavy and tended to descend into the earth. Yin was the unperfected soul and the only thing that could quench the yearnings of Yang, which was the perfect spirit. The interaction between these two contrary principles was what created the material universe. The Arabian alchemist Jabir expanded the doctrine of the two contraries by combining his philosophical readings with his experimental observations. As learned in Chapter 3, Jabir believed the first matter deep at the heart of the earth gave off two opposing exhalations, or spirits, that became sulfur and mercury. According to Jabir, metals were formed by differing impurities and concentrations of sulfur and mercury. Gold was the purest and most balanced or perfect combination of this primal pair. To transform base metals into gold, it was necessary to purify and balance their sulfur and mercury. Jabir also believed there existed a philosopher's stone that would instantly transform base metals into gold by permanently joining the two contraries of sulfur and mercury. Sulfur, mercury, and salt. For nearly 700 years, Jabir's version of the two contraries dominated alchemy. Then the great Swiss alchemist Paracelsus reorganized the sulfur-mercury theory to include a third component called salt. He also clarified and corrected what other alchemists had been saying about these very basic ideas for so many years. The result was the theory of the three essentials, which turned sulfur, mercury, and salt into powerful universal tools that gave alchemists greater insight into the nature of reality. Philosophically, the three essentials were viewed as universal forces present on all levels of reality. Their relationship and interaction determine how substances come into being and are transformed. Paracelsus defined the three essentials by how they behave in fire. Sulfur is seen as what fuels the fire or what is changed in the fire. Thus, oil, fat, wood, and coal are all forms of sulfur. Mercury is the volatile, watery essence of the fire that Paracelsus called the phlegma, and it is represented by the flames, light, heat, and smoke issuing from the fire. The new principle of salt exhibits the fixed essence of the substance burning that resists the fire and is found in the ashes. The three principles from which all things are born and generated, said Paracelsus, are phlegma, fat, and ash. In the burning of wood, for example, sulfur is the wood fuel which is consumed in the fire. Mercury is the smoke, heat, and light that comes from the fire, and salt is the wood ashes created by the fire. As Paracelsus put it, the fire is mercury, what is burnt is sulfur, and all ash is salt. Sulfur is the fiery, solar, active, masculine principle that gives a substance its active properties and identity in relationship to other substances. In alchemy, it is usually associated with the sun and king. In the laboratory, sulfur is the flammable, oily material extracted from substances, such as the essential oils of plants. For alchemists, sulfur embodied all those characteristics that we now associate with the idea of active energy. Mercury is the watery, lunar, passive, feminine principle that represents the hidden essence and creative source of life within things, and is usually associated with the moon and queen in alchemy. In the laboratory, mercury is usually extracted from substances by the process of distillation, such as the alcohol distilled from fermented grains and fruits. The alchemists referred to mercury as the mother of the stone, and felt it was the mediator between sulfur and salt in the creation of new compounds. In Hermetic philosophy, mercury is like the basic blueprint of a thing, the carrier of its image or ideal form that comes into being through the interaction of sulfur and salt. Mercury embodied those characteristics that we now associate with the concept of light and mind. Salt represents fixity, materialization, and the formation of bodies, and embodies those characteristics that we associate with the idea of mass or matter. In their writings, the alchemists sometimes refer to salt as magnesia, which was actually a mystical term referring to the transformative principle concealed in salt. Like the first matter, salt shows up at both the beginning and the end of the work. It is the imperfect and corrupted matter at the beginning of the experiment that must be destroyed and dissolved to release its essences, so they can be purified and reconstituted into the perfect new salt at the end of the experiment. The four elements, the fundamental principles of matter, have their origin in the three essentials. The archetypal force of sulfur gives rise to the fire element. Mercury, in keeping with its dual nature, produces both air and water elements. And finally, the salt principle is the source of the earth element. From The Alchemist. Although alchemists and modern physicists use different terminology, they agree about the three fundamental forces of nature. In fact, Einstein's equation of the universe, E equals mc squared, is as valid in alchemy as it is in modern science. Sulfur is energy, E, salt is matter, M, and mercury is light, C. For both alchemists and physicists, energy and matter are really the same thing, whose final expression is determined by the intermediary of light. In alchemical philosophy, matter is like condensed energy whose form is projected by the light of mind. So if that little c in Einstein's equation stood for consciousness instead of the speed of light, there would be no difference between alchemy and modern physics. The dance of sulfur and mercury. A surprising thing about the three essentials is usually revealed only at the later stages of initiation. The three essentials are not really as identifiable and set in their properties as you might suppose. They are not the static laws or immutable universal constants you assume them to be. I've already noted that salt can exist in two forms, one at the beginning and the other at the end of the work. Well, sulfur and mercury have a much more dynamic relationship. Sulfur and mercury are like two dancers who change into one another as they spin around the dance floor. These two volatile principles are sometimes so hard to distinguish from one another that alchemists believed they were actually two faces of the same thing. They named it the rebus, Latin for double thing, and pictured it as a two-headed hermaphrodite. The strange love affair between sulfur and mercury is what makes alchemical transformation possible. This unique relationship of sulfur and mercury is also suggested in drawings of the Ouroboros showing two dragons or serpents eating each other's tails. One is dark and one is light, and one has wings and the other has feet. As the Ouroboros spins through time and space, the two parts change into one another. The alchemist views this as the engine that drives reality. The sulfur-mercury dynamic is most clearly depicted in the Taoist symbol of yang and yin, known as the Taijitu. The opposing forces of yang and yin are shown inside a circle that is divided into a white yang section with a small black circle within it, and a black yin section with a small white circle within it. The smaller circles represent the seeds of their opposites that both yang and yin carry. In other words, each carries the seed of its opposite and eventually transforms into it. Psychologist Carl Jung called this mysterious process of one thing changing into its opposite by the unwieldy name of enandromedria. Whatever you call it, it requires a fluid mind and a little dedication to fully absorb its power. If your meditation prolongs itself, promised the Persian mystic Zoroaster, you can unite all these symbols. The kindred affair between sulfur and mercury explains a conundrum faced by most students of alchemy in their reading of alchemy texts. In some descriptions, mercury is associated with spirit and sulfur with soul. In other texts, however, sulfur is spirit and mercury is soul. We can now understand that both views are correct. The identities of sulfur and mercury depend on the situation or the context of the discussion. It all depends on where we stop them in their whirling dance. In general, sulfur deals with the energy aspects of a substance or situation, while mercury deals with the aspects of inner life and awareness. If the subject is any kind of active energy or fire, then sulfur is spirit. Tread carefully. Don't let the dance of sulfur and mercury confuse you. Their blurred identities are part of the mystery of creation. Unfortunately, every author seems to have an opinion as to what they represent. That is why Paracelsus set the standard definitions that most alchemists after him have followed. Mercury is spirit and sulfur is soul. If the subject is any kind of potential or unexpressed energy, then sulfur is soul. On the other hand, if the topic is an indwelling life or active intelligence, then mercury is spirit. And if the subject is an unborn identity or unconscious force, then mercury is soul. Salt is the resultant force that gives expression and purpose to the dance of sulfur and mercury. Salt is the child of their marriage. It freezes the dance of opposites, grounds them, and condenses their light and energy, form, and matter. The three essentials in people. Psychologically, the principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt form a triad of transformative powers that are available to us if we can learn to purify and control them. In the body, says the Book of Lamsprink, there is soul and spirit. He that knows how to tame and master them by art, to couple them together and to lead them, may justly be called a master. For we rightly judge that he has attained the golden flesh. In people, the three essentials are represented by the three concepts of mind, body, and spirit in the soul. Salt is the body, mercury is the spirit, and sulfur is the soul. Know then, declared Paracelsus, that all the 7 metals are born from a threefold matter, namely mercury, sulfur, and salt, although each metal has its own distinct and peculiar colorings. Mercury is the spirit, sulfur is the soul, and salt is the body. The soul, which indeed is sulfur, unites those two contraries, the body and the spirit, and changes them into one essence. In general, when talking about people, the easily ignited sulfur of soul stands for our inner passion and willpower, while the fluid force of the mercury and spirit represents our ever-changing thoughts and powers of visualization and imagination. The hermaphroditic salt of their union is the philosopher's stone, a perfective state of consciousness that combines passion and feeling with thought and imagination. From The Alchemist. In the Golden Dawn and other magical traditions, Mercury is associated with spirit and the mental faculty of imagination. Sulfur is associated with willpower and its connection to the deep reservoir of transformative energy in the soul. Both the imagination of Mercury and the will of sulfur must be called into action, said a 19th century Golden Dawn member. They are co-equal in the work. When the two are conjoined and the imagination creates an image and the will directs and uses that image, then marvelous magical effects can be obtained. The three treasures of Taoist alchemy. In Taoist alchemy, the three essentials are known as the three treasures and are called Shen, Qi, and Qing. These concepts translate roughly as spirit, vitality, and essence. In general, Shen represents Mercury, Qi represents sulfur, and Qing is salt. However, because Taoist alchemy focuses so much on working in the body, subtle differences exist between the Eastern and Western viewpoints. In Taoist teachings, the characteristics of the three treasures can be found in the burning of a candle. Shen, or Mercury, is the radiant light given off by the flame. Qi, or sulfur, is the heat given off by the candle, and Qing, or salt, is the wax and wicks of the candle, which are both its structure and the condensed energy of its fuel. Shen, or Mercury, is considered the guiding spirit or mind that directs the energy of Qi, or sulfur. Like Mercury in the Western tradition, Shen is the most important of the three treasures in the alchemy of transformation. Shen is experienced as a presence or spirit within that produces an all-embracing sense of compassion that resides in the heart. It gives people their spiritual radiance, and is thus the source of our innate knowledge that everything is one. Shen resides in both heaven and earth, and gives us the ability to rise above the mundane world. Qi, or sulfur, is the energy that moves in our bodies and gives us our vitality. It is the universal energy created by the constant interaction of yin and yang, the two moving powers in the world. Qi embodies these two contraries of yang and yin. Fast-moving qi is considered to be yang, while slow-moving qi is yin. All movement and all functioning are the result of qi, and the nature of qi is to keep moving. In esoteric anatomy, qi is carried in the blood, and in the air we constantly breathe in and out. Blood is produced from the fires of metabolism, and qi is extracted from ingested food through the action of the spleen. Red blood cells are nourishing and are considered yin, while white blood cells are protective and are considered yang. Qi also enters through the lungs, where it circulates through energetic pathways called meridians throughout the body. Qing, or salt, is a mysterious substance called the superior ultimate of the three treasures. The word Qing means regenerative essence and is considered to be a concentrated energy that manifests physically in the body. Qing is seen as perfect blend of yang and yin energy, and it is therefore not moving energy but static or heavy energy. It is the source of our sexuality and the life force that operates the body's cells and organs. Qing exists before the body comes into being and becomes the root of our body when we are born. We cannot live without Qing. It's a fundamental heavy essence that accumulates in the body. If we can learn to conserve Qing, we can live vigorous and long lives. Qing is burned up by chronic stress and excessive behavior such as overwork, overeating, sexual excess, emotionalism, and substance abuse. Shen is intimately related to Qi and Qing, and only when all three treasures are in balance does the whole system thrive. Qi condenses into Qing, and when we develop and accumulate Qing, we also increase Qi automatically. And when Qi is accumulated and purified, it strengthens Shen. When the three become one, said the alchemist Liu in his treatise Complete Reality, the great elixir is made. The least you need to know. The three essentials originated from the first matter at the beginning of creation. The two contraries are Mercury and sulfur in the Western tradition, or yin and yang in the Eastern tradition. The three essentials are the philosophical substances known as sulfur, mercury, and salt. The three essentials are present everywhere in the universe and are expressed in every substance, including people. The three treasures of Taoist alchemy are Shen, or mercury, Qi, or sulfur, and Qing, or salt. Chapter 9, The Philosopher's Stone. In this chapter, origins of the concept of a philosopher's stone, the powers of the philosopher's stone, the appearance and preparation of the stone, the genius of Dr. John Dee, the magical cipher of the stone. The idea of the philosopher's stone originated with Alexandrian alchemists and soon captured the imagination of people around the world. By the Middle Ages, the philosopher's stone became the holy grail of alchemy. It became not only the key to transforming base metals into gold, but also held the secret to eternal life and spiritual perfection. Because the stone could turn a corruptible base metal into incorruptible gold, it would similarly transform human beings from mortal or corruptible beings into immortal or incorruptible beings. The origins of the concept of the philosopher's stone can be seen in the theory of the four elements and the possibility of transforming one element into another. There was also an ancient belief that metals could be transformed into one another. This belief probably originated with the observation that some precious metals could be obtained from the ores of base metals. For instance, silver is often obtained from galena, the mineral ore of lead. The preparation of metal tinctures and alloys that imparted the characteristics of gold suggested a single agent might exist that would transmute the metals. The spiritual significance of the philosopher's stone originated in the Egyptian belief in the perfection of the soul and the creation of an immortal golden body. The mystical doctrine of the regeneration of mankind was part of the spiritual traditions of many early civilizations, and the philosopher's stone was the physical manifestation of that fundamental desire for perfection. The magical touchstone. In Latin, the philosopher's stone was called the lapis philosophorum, or the stone of the philosophers. But the Greeks knew it as the chrysopoeia, or heart of gold. It was also referred to as the magisterium, the magistry, spiritus mundi, or spirit of the world, stone of the wise, diamond of perfection, universal medicine, and the elixir. The 8th century Arabian alchemist Jabir did much to popularize the notion of the philosopher's stone among alchemists. He reasoned that one could accomplish the transmutation of one metal into another by the rearrangement of its basic qualities, and that a magical substance would expedite the transformation. The Arabs called this agent al-iksir, from which our word elixir derived. Many religious scholars believe the philosopher's stone is synonymous with the symbol of the stone found in many spiritual traditions, such as the Old Testament stone Jacob rested his head upon, the New Testament rock Christ laid as the foundation of the temple, the Holy Grail or cup of Christ, the Yesodic foundation stone of the Kabbalah, and the cubic stone of Freemasonry. In some ways, the philosopher's stone also resembles the forbidden fruit of Genesis and symbolizes knowledge that human beings are not meant to possess. No doubt the philosopher's stone was the key to success in alchemy. Not only could it instantly transmute any metal into gold, but it was also the alkahest, or universal solvent, which dissolved every substance immersed in it and immediately extracted its quintessence, or active essence. The stone was used in the preparation of the aurum potabile, drinkable gold, a remedy that would perfect the human body. It was also used to restore a plant or animal from its ashes in a process called palingenesis. Because the philosopher's stone carried the quintessence or life force, it could even be used to create artificial living beings, called homunculi. Thoth's tips. Did you know that the first book in the Harry Potter series deals with the philosopher's stone? However, publishers felt the British title, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was, well, too philosophical for American audiences, so they changed it to the more fetching Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The book acknowledges the alchemist Nicholas Flamel successfully created the stone, although he ultimately destroyed the wondrous object because he feared human beings would never learn to use it wisely. The stone, Dumbledore explains to Harry, was really not such a wonderful thing. As much money and life as you could want, the two things most human beings would choose above all. The trouble is, humans do have a knack of choosing precisely those things that are worst for them. What the Philosopher's Stone looked like. Much has been written about the Philosopher's Stone, and there are scores of recipes for its preparation. In fact, whole books have been devoted to its creation. One example is the 17th century Mutus Liber, or Silent Book, which is a symbolic instruction manual of 15 illustrations showing how to concoct the stone. Surprisingly, we know quite a bit about what the Philosopher's Stone looked like. It was dark red in color and resembled a common irregular stone. The material of which the stone was made was the same red powder of projection so prized by the alchemists. The Philosopher's Stone had the peculiar property of exhibiting a variable weight. Sometimes it was as heavy as a piece of gold, and other times as light as a feather. Its primary ingredient was an equally mysterious element known as karmat. Karmat may have been a mythological substance, because no mention of it exists outside alchemy, nor does it appear in any list of modern chemical compounds. Although many reports of the creation of the Philosopher's Stone exist among Arabian and European alchemists, one of the most credible is from the revered alchemist Albertus Magnus, who reported he had successfully created gold by transmutation in the later years of his life. When Magnus died in 1280, he passed the miraculous object on to his student, Thomas Aquinas, who is also said to have made many successful transmutations using it. Another credible report of the creation of the Philosopher's Stone comes from the 16th century Swiss alchemist Paracelsus. He discovered what he called the alkahest, a single substance from which all the elements, fire, water, air, and earth, derived. He used this substance as the chief ingredient in creating his Philosopher's Stone. From The Alchemist. The power of the Philosopher's Stone to transform anything lies in its connection to all realms, light and dark. Like the first matter, it exists suspended in the twilight world, where between energy and matter. The Philosopher's Stone heals all rifts and unites all opposites. "Receive this stone, which is not a stone," said the Alexandrian alchemist Zosimos. "A precious thing to have that has no value, a thing of many shapes that has no shape. This unknown which is known by all." Preparation of the Philosopher's Stone. According to alchemical literature, there were two ways to create the Philosopher's Stone: the wet way and the dry way. The wet way, or humid way, used natural processes and was more gradual and safer than the dry way, which relied on intense heat and powerful chemicals to achieve the stone in a shorter time. Even in spiritual alchemy, there was a wet way in which natural inspiration built gradually in the initiate to reach the fervor necessary for personal transformation, and a dry way, in which the initiate attempted to ascend on a direct path to divine knowledge. The wet way worked with the slow fires of nature, while the dry way worked with the raging fires of our lower nature. The rapid spiritual ascent of the dry way was very dangerous for unprepared initiates and could result in a loss of personal identity or even madness. The tantric alchemists of India followed the direct path by trying to release and control sexual energies, while the path of shamanic alchemy consisted of the use of powerful plant allies and psychoactive drugs. There is no doubt some medieval alchemists made use of such preparations. Alchemists, the first chemists, were very much aware of the psychological and spiritual effects of the compounds they created. In the laboratory, the wet way began with slow digestion and putrefaction of the matter that could go on for many months. The dry way began with roasting and heating in an intense fire that might only last a few hours. In both methods, this process was known as the black phase, in which the matter blackened as it was reduced to its basic essences. The black phase gave way to the white phase. in which a purification of the matter took place and the essences were separated out from any contamination. In the dry way, this appeared as a white crust formed by dry matter carried by gases bursting in bubbles on the surface of the material. Sometimes the crust puffed up and released a cloud of white vapor into the flask, which was called the white eagle. In the wet way, a white layer of digesting bacteria formed on top of the putrefied material, which was called the white swan. During the final red phase, the energies released in the previous operations were captured in a solution or powder. In the dry way, this was the appearance of a red coloring on the surface of the molten material, or in the ashes, which was caused by high temperature oxidation reduction reactions and was symbolized by the phoenix rising from the fire. In the wet way, the final phase was sometimes signaled by the appearance of a reddish swirl of oil or pink globules on the surface of the matter. This was associated with the pelican, which sometimes regurgitated a meal of freshly killed fish for its young and stained its white breast plumage with red blood. The mysterious Dr. D. The most powerful cipher in all of alchemy is a rather odd-looking glyph. This is the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone, and it's said to incorporate some of the powers of the stone whenever it is drawn. In other words, the cipher is believed to carry its own spirit or intelligence, which is evoked every time it is written down or constructed. The name of this cipher is the hieroglyphic monad, and it was created by Dr. John Dee, a British alchemist who revealed the hieroglyphic monad to the world. Dee was a true Renaissance man who achieved world renown as a mathematician, mapmaker, cryptographer, magician, philosopher, and astrologer. Dee believed his proof would revolutionize astronomy, alchemy, mathematics, linguistics, mechanics, music, optics, magic, and adeptship. He even urged astronomers to stop peering through their telescopes, trying to understand the heavens, and instead spend their time meditating on his monad. The Cipher of the Stone. Dee believed his cipher was the true philosopher's stone. The frontispiece of his hieroglyphic monad is a succinct explanation of the cipher itself, and the frontispiece was considered so important in Elizabethan times that it became known around the world as the Greater Seal of London. At the center of this frontispiece is the monad cipher within an inverted egg filled with embryonic fluid and known as the hermetic egg. The fluid represented the first matter. The yolk is represented as a circle and a point at the center of the figure. The circle with a center point is the cipher for gold and the sun. The lunar crescent symbol of the moon intersects the upper part of the yellow yolk of the sun. Thus, the sun and moon are united in gold at this level, which represents perfection or the end of the great work. Within the frame surrounding the monad are found the four elements and the three essentials of sulfur, the sun on the left of the pillar, salt, the moon on the right of the pillar, and Mercury, the center symbol. Two rounded lunar crescents or waves representing the water element are at the bottom of the monad. They come together to form the ram horns of the sign of Aries, which signifies fire. Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, is associated with the burst of life force in the spring, at which time the great work begins. To begin the work of this monad, wrote Dee, the aid of fire is required. A cross, known as the cross of the elements, connects the bottom and the top of the cipher. Here the workings of manifested reality play out. In this section of the monad, all the glyphs of the 5 visible planets, along with the symbols for the sun and moon, intersect. The metals are also indicated because in alchemy, the ciphers for the planets and its metal are the same. Saturn is lead, Jupiter is tin, Mars is iron, Venus is copper, Mercury is quicksilver, Moon is silver, and the sun is gold. By tracing the connecting lines and arcs in different ways, one can locate all the symbols of the planets and their metals, and thereby reveal the invisible forces behind nature. The merged planetary ciphers are arranged left to right and top to bottom around the cross of the elements. According to Dee, by placing the planetary ciphers in their proper relationship, the astronomical symbols are imbued with an immortal life, allowing their coded meaning to be expressed, most eloquently in any tongue and to any nation. In this arrangement, the sun is the only symbol that is always the same, and in that sense, incorruptible like gold. No matter which way the monad is turned, upside down, left to right, right to left, or its mirror image, the cipher of the sun and gold is always exactly the same. Those tips. The monad is a powerful symbol, and alchemists believe it should be treated with the greatest reverence. Starting with the cipher of Saturn or 10, see if you can identify all the planetary ciphers. Then recreate the monad on a sheet of paper by constructing the ciphers one on top of the other. Drawing the monad in this way is a meditative exercise that invokes the symbol's transformative power if done properly. The heart of the monad and the one cipher that encompasses all the others is Mercury. In alchemy, Mercury stands for the principle of transformation itself. Just as depicted in the monad, Mercury is part of all the metals and elements of alchemy and melds them together as one. Dee embedded the spirit of Mercury at the heart of his master symbol and believed he had successfully captured the essences of all the archetypal elements in metals. The lost key to monad. Dee believed his monad carried the secret of transformation of anything in the universe, but he never spoke of its meaning publicly because he felt the monad was much too powerful to share with the uninitiated. He privately told other alchemists that his symbol not only described the precise interrelationship of the planetary energies, but also showed the way to transmutation of the metals, as well as the spiritual transformation of the alchemist. Dee wrote a private, unpublished book explaining in detail the workings of the monad. In the inventory of his massive library was a description of that book, which he intended only for his fellow alchemists. But Dee's secret key was destroyed when a mob of Anglican fundamentalists broke into his home and burned his entire library. Dee had the final say, however. He who devotes himself sincerely to these mysteries, he said, will see clearly that nothing is able to exist without the virtue of our hieroglyphic monad. And he gave this advice to anyone who would read his proof. Whoever does not understand should either learn or be silent. The least you need to know. The idea of the philosopher's stone originated with Alexandrian and Arabian alchemists. The philosopher's stone was like a magical touchstone that could instantly perfect or cure anything. Dr. John Dee created a cipher that embodied both the formula to create the philosopher's stone and its magical powers. Dr. Dee's mathematical proof for his cipher of the philosopher's stone is called the hieroglyphic monad.